Welcome back to Beyond Brands, the podcast where we dive deep into the art, science, and magic of marketing. I'm your host, Dhruv Shah, and today we have an incredibly exciting episode lined up for you. In this episode, we'll learn and explore more about how retailers can thrive in the ever evolving world of omnichannel marketing, balancing physical and e commerce strategies. We'll also dive into experiential marketing and uncover what it takes to craft unforgettable campaigns, blend the physical and digital worlds. To help us unpack all of this today, I am thrilled to welcome David Pullara. David is the principal of DP Ventures, where he helps businesses accelerate growth through expert consulting, training, and fractional CMO services. With over 20 years of experience across global giants like Starbucks, Coca-Cola, and Google, David has truly mastered the art of consumer-centric marketing. He is also a passionate educator, teaching retail marketing strategies at the Schulich School of Business. David, it's a pleasure having you today on the Beyond Brands podcast, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Dhruv.
Yeah, you've had an incredible career across some of the world's most well-known brands. And before we dive in, could you share one thing about yourself that people might not know but plays a big role in how it's shaped your career?
That's a really tough question because, I'm kind of an open book. I have a blog that I write every week. Maybe that's a thing people don't know. dpthoughts.ca. I have a blog that I write every week with like almost 700 entries, and so I share a lot about myself, probably too much. But what I think the blog helps me is to practice my writing. Writing is a skill. It's like a muscle. You have to practice it and build it every day. And then also help to articulate my thoughts and build strong arguments. So that's helped me in my career for sure, my writing.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that all of you all can also check out the books that David's written, and diving in specifically into omnichannel marketing. Right, I think in the ever evolving retail marketing landscape, a lot of people argue that physical retail stores are on their way out. Especially with how convenient e-commerce shopping has become today. What are your thoughts in terms of how retailers can, what can they do to ensure that people are still coming back to their stores?
So it's actually funny. The research actually suggests the opposite. Physical retail isn't dead.
Yeah.
It's not even dying. Bad retail is dying. Because I think consumers have a heightened expectation. E-commerce has had a huge part to play in that. I can pick up my phone and order something and have it on my doorstep tomorrow, right? So if I know that, I can get almost anything in the world delivered to my doorstep, usually for free, in a very short time period at a good price. Physical retail has to give me a reason to leave my house. Right.
Absolutely.
And but there are reasons to leave your house. I mean, there's lots of different reasons people enjoy the art of the act of shopping. There is going and shopping with your friends, right? Nobody gathers around a computer and does online shopping together, right? But walking the mall with your friends is still a thing. Retailers that create great destinations, great experiences, cool things to look at, cool things to explore. That still happens. So I don't think physical retail is going anywhere, but retailers have to up their game in terms of what they're going to do to encourage people to leave their houses.
Absolutely. I think, like you mentioned it, right? Going to the mall just with your friends and walking around. I think to be able to do that, often, or to actually consciously plan and do that today, given that there's so many other things that have come up that you can do, even in fact virtually with your friends, there needs to be something that's really pulling you there. I think that's what I feel. I would like to hear, from you in terms of this specifically. What can retailers do that could pull crowd, without necessarily the intention of going there to shop, but just going there to, experience something?
So I'll give you a great example. So last week I took my class to Yorkdale Mall. First time I ever tried this, but it was a retail tour. So trying to kind of take all the things that I've taught in the last 10 weeks of the course and go and explore them in the wild, And there were two stores that really stuck out for me.
Right.
The first was the Peloton store. And the Peloton store is really not that impressive to just when you walk in. It shows, here's the clothes that we sell and here's the machines, and that's fine. But we started talking to the store manager, and he showed us the section at the back of the store, which none of us knew about. And they had private rooms that you could book and do a full workout with the equipment. And then they had a shower where you could clean up. So you could go to Yorkdale Mall and do a full workout at the Peloton store and shower up and then hop on the TCC and go to work. To me, that was pretty incredible. Now, I don't think they're doing a great job of telling people about that's something that exists. But, the fact that you're able to actually try their products, not in a sense of, oh, I'm just going to step on this treadmill and, oh, it's a treadmill. Why should I buy a Peloton treadmill instead of any of the treadmills? You could actually do a full workout in the back with the Peloton instructors, seeing what the community is like. That's an experience, right? And so that is perhaps one small example of what Peloton is really selling is not the equipment. It's the community that comes with subscribing to the Peloton app. And you get a chance to actually do that with someone just a few steps away. If they have any questions they want to answer or you have for them, they can answer for you. Trying the equipment in a private setting, that's a good example of a brand that's using their store well. They're not promoting that well, but they're using it well. The other store, just basically across the street from the Peloton store, that all my students found fascinating was the Dyson store. And Dyson, I'm sure be familiar with Dyson, but they started out with vacuums, and now they do a whole bunch of other stuff. Yeah. Vacuum cleaners are not an exciting product, generally speaking. But I had a Dyson ball vacuum, and I'm telling you, I never thought I'd be excited about a vacuum cleaner. I was very excited about this product because it's a cool product, and the technology's cool, and how they built it is cool, and the story behind James Dyson trying all these things and failing all of these things are cool. But what was interesting about the store is that the store is kind of set up almost like a museum that you can touch and feel. And so you walk in, and they have vacuums, but they use their wall space to explain the technology and why it's so different. So the features and benefits of every component. And then they're using, videos to show why it's such a big deal. And then, and this was the cool part, they had a bit of like a carpet on the floor and a hardwood, and then they had stuff you could spill on it. And so they had like different particles. They had, here's a bunch of dust, here's a bunch of hair. And so you could actually see how the vacuum works on different surfaces, works with different stuff. So here's my point on that, right? If Dyson is selling vacuums, most retailers would just say, here's the vacuums that we have available, and here's the price tag, and maybe there's a little card trying to describe what's different. Dyson is making vacuuming an experience and a cool experience, and that was just the vacuuming station, right? They also sell a bunch of hair products, and they had a station set up where you could book an appointment with a stylist, and they'd come in and use the products with you.
Wow.
Right? And so they had each of these things. So it wasn't just when you walk into, an electronics store, here's a bunch of electronics on the shelf. It was, here's what our products actually do, and you could actually have a chance to experience them. Wow. And so there was a reason for me to go to the Dyson store if I'm looking at a Dyson product.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting, especially knowing that I'm probably not someone who's looking to buy a vacuum, but then I find out that there's something really fascinating about a USP of a specific product, and I get to actually test it. I think there's a lot of potential conversion from someone who's not a lead to at least making them a lead at some point.
And it's not, what I think it's important is, this was an undergraduate class, right? So we're talking, 20, 21 years old.
Yeah.
These are not necessarily the target audience for a vacuum.
Yeah.
But the brand impression that Dyson was able to make pretty much guarantees that when they are in the market for a vacuum, that's going to be 100%. One of the brands that they're thinking of.
100%.
Are they going to buy a Dyson? I don't know. Dysons are not inexpensive vacuums, so maybe your first vacuum is not going to be a Dyson. But the fact that they were able to have that experience, I think, based on their reactions anyway, it kind of locked that brand in their mind, in that consideration set. So now that when they think of great vacuums, cool vacuums I want to buy, they're thinking Dyson. And I think that's what the power of a great experience, whether it's in store or online,
Yeah.
but in store is powerful.
I
That's what it
completely,
does.
yeah, I completely agree. I think, like you said, right, 21-year-olds probably not their target audience, but then it definitely occupies top of mind recall whenever the person's either talking about something similar to it, even at home or elsewhere, or when they eventually do buy one. I think Dyson sort of established that top of mind recall, which is great.
Sure. We went into the Lucid dealership as well. So it was
Right.
3 car dealerships at Yorkdale,
Uh-huh.
right? And I mean, none of my students, to my knowledge, are in the market for a $100,000 car.
Yeah.
But it's very aspirational. And when you walked in, and this was really key, right? We walked in, and to the person's credit, that were there at Lucid, they knew that we were a bunch of students. We
Yeah.
walked in a big group. We probably weren't buying, but they still treated us really well.
Yeah.
And I think that's also I know that's also a part of the brand. So it felt approachable. They were like, yeah, sure, look around. Most people, I'm not sure we would have had that same reaction if we tried to walk into the Rolex store.
Yeah.
And that's fine, and I get
Yeah.
it. You can't slip a Lucid in your pocket. But I think that it's entirely the point of walking into a store, you can actually walk into the brand. And so if your brand is supposed to be friendly and approachable, but your sales staff are neither of those things, that's a problem. And if your brand is supposed to be, warm and comforting, but everything feels and looks cold and uninviting, that's a problem. So your physical store is the opportunity for you to showcase your brand in a way that it's much, much
Yeah.
more difficult to do online. Online has its place. Look, I would probably never leave my house if I could. If I could get everything just delivered. It's
Yeah.
very convenient. It's very easy. Shopping is not something I like to do, so it's more of a chore for me. So it makes this chore easier. But I'm a convenience-oriented customer for most things. When I do venture out into an actual physical store, I want it to be worth my while. Sometimes that's the experience. Sometimes that's, the discovery,
Got
right?
it.
My favorite retailer is Costco. I love Costco. I spend way too much money every time I walk into a Costco, but it's the exploration. It's the treasure hunt. You walk through the aisles and you're like, oh, I didn't know I needed this thing, but I guess I do. So,
Yeah.
and Costco's mastered that. But shopping at Costco is that treasure hunt experience. You don't get that online.
Yeah, I think shopping at Costco is essentially where you build your shopping list while you're actually doing the shopping and not before you go.
Dangerous, yes, but
But yeah, so I think what I do want to understand, right? Like let's say picture this: you are a brick and mortar retailer today. What would be 3 recommendations that you would give someone who's running the store to be able to still blend effective, physical and retail strategies to stay relevant?
I think marketers talk a lot about physical and digital as separate things,
Uh-huh.
and I don't think they should, because I don't think consumers generally think that way. I think
Right.
that when I'm shopping, I'm looking at what's the easiest way to buy it, and if something pops up and I know, oh, the easiest way to buy it is to pick up my phone and just order it, then I'll do that. And if I'm wandering in a mall and I think, oh, I need to buy that, maybe I'll stop in the store because it'll be convenient,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I think the retailer has to worry less about blending online and physical, and more about a consistent experience between online and physical, right? So, it shouldn't feel completely different when I walk into a physical store as opposed to what I see on the website.
Yeah.
It's not to say it has to be identical, but it should feel the same.
Right.
So I think the first thing in terms of recommendation is make sure there's a level of consistency, right?
Right.
I tell a story when I start every retail class about a situation where my wife was trying to buy a sweater for my daughter at a retailer. I won't name him on the podcast, but I do name them in the class. And the sweater was pretty expensive. And my daughter, was young and she was going to grow up fast. My wife's a savvy shopper. So she picked up her phone and went to this retailer's website and looked up the product, and the product was 50% off. So she went to the cashier and said, "I would like the 50% off, please."
Yeah, yeah.
The cashier said no. So my wife said, "No problem." Put the sweater down, ordered it. We had it the next day
Yeah.
for 50% off. That store had to then restock the product, and they didn't sell that product. We could have left with it, and they had to ship me product and pay for shipping to deliver it to my house. Right?
Absolutely.
That inconsistency is not something that consumers these days want to tolerate. So the first thing is be
100%.
consistent, I say.
100%.
The second thing I alluded to earlier is give people a reason to shop in the store. And how do you blend that? It's people are used to, they all have their phones, right? It's pretty ubiquitous these days. So it's okay to enhance the things that you have in the store with technology, right?
Yeah.
At a low level, maybe that's QR codes for more information, right?
Correct.
People are comfortable now scanning a code and going to more information.
100%.
Some retailers are using, digital mirrors
Yeah.
for a clothing store, for example. So I don't necessarily have to. I hate going into a fitting room, taking off the shirt, trying on the shirt. I don't like the shirt. Trying a different size, trying a different color.
Yeah.
These days, there's a virtual mirror where you can just do all that with clicks of the button, right? It makes it easier. So blending that technology together and also creating an experience.
Yeah.
And then I think the third thing would be make sure that your, which kind of ties into the consistency, but just make sure your physical environment is really reflective of your brand.
Absolutely.
If your brand is super exciting, but your store is boring, I'll give you the best example I can think of in this case, Toys R Us, right? I grew up with Toys R Us. Toys R Us kid. I can sing the whole song, right? I love that store, but you would think that Toys R Us, if I'm going to go to a physical store, I want to see a bunch of play centers, right? I want to bring my kids to a place where there's a bunch of Lego spread out and they can play and fall in love with Lego, and then I'll buy the Lego.
Yeah.
And play with the Barbies, and then I'll buy the Barbies,
Yeah.
right? But you walk into a Toys R Us, and I'll pick on them a little bit, but every toy retailer is guilty of this. There isn't places to play. There are rows upon rows of shelves of boxed items, right? Why would I go to a physical retail store for that? I could order boxed items online, right?
Yeah.
So give me a play center and let me fall in love with the brand. Let me support the brand that way.
Yeah.
And I think that's just much more effective.
For sure, I think what you're sort of also touching upon is integrating at least a basic level of experiential, that element into their marketing or even retail experience. And I think that's something that we will talk about a little bit more as we move ahead. One thing that I did want to, understand and talk to you about was, so recently, Starbucks, who offers this really cool omnichannel experience, which is where you can, place your order online and go pick it up from your nearest store. They had a outage on their app very recently, where a lot of people for whom it was habitual to sort of, every morning get up, place the order, go pick up their coffee, obviously found it difficult, right? While these innovative strategies are definitely something that brands should continue exploring, how can a brand build reliability into their strategy to make sure that none of these things happen where a customer journey isn't really interrupted?
The reality is, if your service delivery experience is predicated on 100% perfect execution, you're bound to fail, right? Service is delivered by people. Yeah. People are human. Humans make mistakes. So it's less, I think, about trying for perfection and more about mitigating things that are going to happen. I remember that I was affected that day. It didn't happen a couple of weeks ago. The Starbucks, and I tried to order it, and it wouldn't happen. Yeah. I ended up not buying anything that day, which is a consequence of that. I didn't want to go into the store. I didn't have the time to go into the store.
For sure.
But what are you doing to mitigate it? So if people are coming in at the counter and complaining and saying, oh, I had to come into the counter and why your app's not working, and they're clearly upset about that, Starbucks could say something as simple as, sorry for your inconvenience, right? Mm-hmm. And here's next drink's on us. Here's a $5 gift card, right? Is that expensive? Yeah, that can get expensive. But
Right.
you know what's really expensive? Having someone get frustrated with your brand and leaving forever,
100%. Yeah.
right? So I think the problem is that brand building doesn't happen overnight. It takes years and years
Yeah.
and years to build a great brand, and it can take moments to destroy it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, is it expensive to mitigate some of those things? Yeah. But I think if you're looking at the long-term scheme of things, you're trying your best to, you know, nobody, they didn't want the app to fail, right? That's not something that, so
Obviously,
the
yeah.
app failed, mistakes happen. So fix it, figure out what happened so that doesn't happen again. And for the people who were impacted, say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You know, Scotiabank right now, it had some trouble with their website and their app and whatever. And it's not a, you know, great, it's a problem when you can't get into your banking stuff, right? But, you know, I noticed when I logged in, they had a big banner on the top that said, hey, we're sorry about the app problems or the website problems. We will not be charging you interest or late penalties for the days that were affected.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yes, it's not ideal, but they're doing something to try to make it right. Would they have gone a step further and actually, you know, provided some sort of benefit as opposed to just we won't penalize you? That would have been better.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, definitely, the more proactively consumer-centric or consumer-first a brand is, the less likely they are to lose a customer when things sort of go wrong in situations like this. And I just wanted to now move into talking about experiential marketing that we touched upon, right? Especially today, where if I'm a customer walking into a store and I, for whatever reason, decide whether to buy or not buy a product, I now, because of how retail, you know, that landscape is evolving, I now have an expectation that, okay, I'm looking forward to something else from this brand of this store in terms of an experience, right? How can, and obviously consistency is a really, really crucial part of it, like you mentioned. How can retailers today ensure that there is, you know, some level of an experiential element to what they offer to their customers, and how can they develop this across, you know, all of their stores?
It's not easy.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to say you're customer centric. It's hard to prove it. It's hard
Right.
to set aside the money to invest in it.
Yeah.
And that involves, you know, a whole bunch of things. That's training. That's money set aside to refresh your stores. That's
Absolutely.
people in charge of, you know, you don't just become innovative, right? So I'm thinking of the retailers that have these incredible window displays and have like full teams of people whose sole job is to come up with these window displays every week, right? So that's an investment. But
True.
they've decided that that's important. They've decided that having a fresh look, you know, on a regular basis is
Yeah.
important. And so they invest in that,
Correct.
right? So I think that, you know, it might not be feasible to have a retailer change everything, you know, every day, every
For sure.
week, every
Yeah.
month.
Yeah.
Every quarter is probably possible.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not a complete refresh of, you know, you're not painting the walls every quarter. You're not, you know, buying new fixtures every quarter. But I also don't think you need to, depending on what retail is, right? And I'll also say it's going to vary by industry, right? Fashion have seasons. So
Yeah.
just with the new season,
Yeah.
it's you're automatically changing over your product every season. So what are you doing with your store environment to build that experience up?
Yeah.
Right? If it's a winter display, are you investing in a winter scene? If it's a fall display, same thing,
Yeah.
right? There are little things you can do, but you know, I was always taught when I was at Starbucks, the phrase we always used was retail is detail.
Uh-huh.
And so you have to pay attention to the details, right?
For sure.
There's no one single solution. I think the most important thing is to have a mindset of we're going to be consumer first and we're going to invest in that consumer experience
Yeah.
and then follow through with it.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. I feel, honestly, it's a little bit more difficult to have an experiential setup, provide that experience at a retail level, compared to, let's say, virtually or on a digital platform, given how, especially technology is emerging right now. It's because it's easier to scale. You don't have to worry about consistency as much, and you're reaching a lot more people for sure, right? So I think something that I did want to talk to you about, right? When you're doing an experiential campaign, it's not always about driving sales directly. It's more about, let's say, creating a memorable experience for the for the customer, or even, sort of creating a buzz around your brand. Red Bull, I believe, does that in a really cool way. Obviously, this is something very popular, what Felix Baumgartner did when they had their Stratos campaign, where he free fell from space. I mean, it didn't really have anything directly to do with selling energy drinks exactly, but
Well, no, I disagree. It had everything to do with selling energy drinks
Yeah.
because Red Bull, and so I know that example very well
Yeah.
because at the time I was in charge of Coca-Cola's energy drink portfolio. So Red Bull was our competitor,
yeah.
and we were trying to compete with a brand that had the money to send somebody up to the edge of space and drop them off, right? Like, so very difficult. But it has everything to do with energy drinks because their brand was excitement and adventure and daring. And what's
Absolutely.
more daring than like jumping out of a spaceship,
Yeah.
right? So they did an exceptional job on that. But I agree with you on the point that, and energy drinks in general, we spent, I won't tell you the exact numbers, but the majority of our marketing budget every year was spent on experiential.
Yeah.
And we had a cool NOS crew, and they would hang out at various stadiums and various events, and they would hand out our drink. And
yeah.
at the time, the drink was technically a natural health product, so we couldn't give you a free energy drink. That's not allowed
Correct.
with a natural health product.
Yeah.
So we had to ask you to pay for it with a penny.
Uh-huh.
And so back
Yeah.
in the time we had pennies. And then we'd hand out the drink. But it was about the experience that we created, the look we created. We had very friendly people handing out these drinks.
Yeah.
And then you got to try it, right? So it
For
was
sure.
absolutely about the drink and about the taste of it, but it was also about the experience we tried to create. I mean, one year I remember we sponsored like a video game awards.
Yeah.
And if you're a serious gamer and you're up all night, energy drinks is pretty good fit
for sure,
for that
for sure.
audience. So just being there and having our brand associated with that was an experience, and that people, we took advantage of.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with the fact that obviously, if the campaign's done right, it's aligned to what your brand stands for and what your product offers. Definitely, it's going to show you results. But that was more of my question, right? When you're doing campaigns like this, how exactly do you measure the ROI in terms of, let's say, sales, right? Because that's obviously very, very tricky, given that these are usually very high budget activities.
So they don't have to be high budget activities.
Uh-huh.
So you can manage costs for sure. Attribution is always going to be tough, right?
Yeah.
What's the direct spend of making a positive impression on me and me carrying that impression? I mean, that's brand building. There are ways. It's a misconception that brand building can't be measured. It absolutely can. There are absolutely tools that you can use to measure the effect of brand campaigns.
Yeah.
They're not accessible to everybody. So if you're a mom and pop retailer, you don't necessarily have that.
Yeah.
But I just think, like, intuitively, just you're a consumer yourself, right? You walk into a store and you're wowed. You know that next time you want to walk into that store, you have a positive impression.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that there's science, and yes, we're able to track it for sure. But there is just some common sense of, people
Yeah.
who are impressed by you and impressed by the products and services you delivered and impressed by your environment are going to be more likely to
Uh-huh.
go to you, right? Like,
Yeah,
I don't think that's an outrageous
Correct.
thought.
Correct. Yeah. I think it also depends on the extent to which you really want to measure it. And if you're able to just measure positive sentiment around your brand at that time, I think that's also a successful metric to sort of look at.
Sure. Everything is about what are you trying to achieve. Like when we did our experiential activations with a NOS energy drink,
Yeah.
our goal was to achieve trial, right?
Uh-huh.
So to an extent,
Correct.
awareness, but
Correct.
people knew us because we were in the cooler right beside Red
Yeah.
Bull. But it's like to get us to taste the product, get people to taste
Yeah.
the product was a big deal for us. So we actually had very sophisticated models that shared that for every X number of cans I gave out,
Yeah.
that would result in X number of purchases later
Got
on,
it.
which would result in X number of people becoming brand loyalists. And we knew the brand loyalists had like,
Yeah.
a higher propensity to buy.
Yeah.
So, the modeling exists, the math exists, there is science out there. It's not, admittedly, it's not necessarily accessible to everybody, but you can develop an ROI on experiential activations. You just need to know what you're trying to achieve, and you have to know enough about your business to be able to create these types of models.
Absolutely. I think, where I really want to steer this conversation is more around the fact that obviously with the emergence of tech today, there's a lot more potential to reach customers and the way you reach customers. For example, before I started my MBA, I used to work at a consumer electronics company in marketing. And in the consumer electronics space, product launches are, especially for your flagship products, are pretty big. And when COVID happened, it was very difficult to, have any sort of physical product launches, right? So get people to a space where they can interact with the product became difficult. So what we had done at the time was we had a virtual product launch, but we integrated AR in a way where customers sitting at home could interact with their product and also have a virtual unboxing experience. So this was, again, about 4 years back, and tech has evolved significantly even since then. Are there campaigns, or where do you see, brands taking this in terms of providing this experience using tech in the future?
That's a difficult question to answer, because it really is. It depends on what type of tech you're talking about. I'm personally very excited about where we're going with AR and VR.
Correct.
I don't think we've cracked it yet. I recently did a demo at the Apple Store of the Vision Pro. I have never been so impressed and excited about a technology as me actually trying it. I'd gone in, I knew about the technology, I'd read about it, I'd seen the videos, but until you actually experience it, it's unbelievable. Now, I was very disappointed to learn that they're scaling back on that, and they made a decision, and I don't like the decision personally. They're not selling a lot of units. Well, each unit's like $5,000. So there was a pretty easy solution to that. You could have dropped it, kind of lowered the price. And Meta, I haven't tried the Oculus, but I hear it's impressive.
Yeah.
But bringing it back to retail, I think that we have, I can see a world that maybe not as dystopian as like Ready Player One, if you've seen that movie or read the book.
Yeah.
But would I love to be able to put on a headset and go shopping and be able to try on things without actually having to try it on? Like, that all sounds wonderful to me. Peter Diamandis wrote a book called The Future is Faster Than You Think. And he describes a situation, and he's thinking it's like 10 years into the future, and he wrote the book a few years ago. So I think we're coming there if he's right. But he describes a world where I can put on this headset, and I can have a virtual clone of myself walk a runway, right? So I can actually watch myself trying on clothes. And I'm like, oh, I like this black T-shirt. Try on that black T-shirt. Okay, cool. And then the model's switching. And, the system knows that I have a certain pair of jeans in my closet at home. And so I have a matching pair of digital jeans that I can try on to see how it looks with the top.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden I select that top. That retailer custom makes that top to my specifications using 3D printing.
Yeah.
Ships it to my house in the next day. Think about that from a consumer perspective. 100%. I've gotten the personalization unparalleled that does not exist today, that level.
Absolutely.
Speed, convenience, customization. I've had all these things.
Yeah.
From the retail perspective, they don't have a showroom full of, or a store full of clothes that they may or may not sell and have to mark down at the end of the season.
Correct.
They've made that shirt with no waste just for me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And sent it out to the house. So, it's a very different world than what we see today. But I think the possibilities of being able to immerse yourself in the brand in a personalized and customized experience are the possibilities are endless.
Absolutely.
It just requires imagination and investment. And those are two things that, sometimes, unfortunately, we're in short supply of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I I want to do this quick segment with you. It's called myth or fact round, to just understand what your opinion on certain statements could be. So yeah, feel free to share an instance, or why you feel a certain way,
Sure.
whether it's a myth or a fact. So the first thing that I wanted to understand whether it was a myth or a fact was user-generated content is usually more effective than professionally produced content in experiential campaigns.
Oh, geez, I need an it depends option. Okay, I'm going to go with myth.
Okay.
But really, it does depend. User generated content, if it's true and if it's authentic, can be amazing. It can be very incredible, very influential. But I'm not discounting the value of professionally
Yeah.
produced content.
Yeah.
This is user generated content. What we're doing right now, right? I mean,
Yeah, I guess.
right. Or
True.
would this be significantly better with a full production staff, or 20 people in the background and doing
Yeah.
edits and whatnot?
Yeah.
Like, the lines are kind of blurred.
Okay.
I think that if we're talking about influencers, that's a whole separate conversation
For
about,
sure.
do you want the big mega influencers or do you want like the tiny micro influencers?
Yeah.
That's a separate conversation. But I think that user generated content under some circumstances can be very effective.
Yeah.
I just would never say that it's always going to be more effective than stuff developed by professionals.
For sure. I sort of resonate with what you say. And yeah, I mean, it's obviously easier to answer this with an it depends.
Yeah, it's always going to be. I mean, I'll try not to fence it for any
But,
other ones.
Yeah. So the next one's actually pretty interesting, and that's something I would personally just really want to understand. So experiential marketing only works for big brands, and small brands can't afford it today.
Myth.
Okay.
I think that experiential marketing does not have to be defined as big, expensive activations. I think that you can be creative on a small budget. I think that smaller brands, mom and pop stores that get to know the consumer and get to know what they like. I guess it's really going to depend on what you consider experiential marketing.
Yeah.
If you are thinking of big activations and incredible technology nobody's ever seen before, yeah, that's out of reach for smaller brands. But how many times have you ordered something from a small mom and pop store and you open up the box and they've put in a little surprise for you?
Yeah.
Right? Or they've put in a note, a heartfelt note.
Yeah.
Or their packaging is unique and quirky, right? I would classify all of that as experiential marketing.
100%.
And it doesn't necessarily cost a lot. It does require thought and attention.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily require money. So no, I'm putting that one firmly in the myth category.
Absolutely. I think I do have a question around this, but I'm going to sort of come to it after the next one because it is sort of interlinked.
Okay.
And you did kind of touch upon it. Does the element of surprise necessarily need to be there in any experiential campaign?
Okay, so it's a question, so it's not myth or fact. So I'll just answer that.
Fair.
I think surprise is hard, right? Because you can only surprise me the first time, and after that, I expect it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my brand management course years
Yeah.
and years and years ago. My instructor talked about she ordered 100th pizza from her pizza place.
Yeah.
And they delivered it to her house and said, "Hey, this is your 100th order. This one's on you," which was amazing. But what do you think happened when she was approaching her 200th order? Now you expected it,
Yeah.
right? The first time was amazing. Then it becomes routine. So a business built on surprise is going to be difficult.
For sure.
But when I was at Starbucks, I don't know if they still have it, but we had a policy of surprise and delight, right? And baristas were given the power to delight customers with a surprise.
Okay.
So, it's your birthday? Here's a cake pop on us, right?
Yeah.
And I think it still happens. I mean, I not too long ago, I was in the drive-through in the minivan with my kids in the back, and my kids were young, and the barista looked out the window and said, "Oh, they're so cute. Do you think they'd like a cake pop?" I was like, well, yes, they would. But, and so we just got comped a bunch of cake pops.
Yeah.
And what was the cost to the store? Couple bucks.
Yeah.
What was the excitement from my children who said, I love Starbucks. Let's go here there again. Right?
Yeah.
So surprise, it doesn't have to be there.
Correct.
But when you can build it in, it's definitely a nice touch.
Absolutely. I think
Pleasant surprises. Let's clarify.
for sure. Absolutely. I think what I was going to ask you is, if I'm a small retailer today and, I also want to provide a delightful experience to my customer through something innovative, leveraging experiential marketing, can it be done without big budgets and just using creativity? I know you did give this example, but then to what extent do you consistently meet your customers' expectations? Because like you said, what I really found interesting is once you do it, a customer sort of has that expectation at the back of their head. So how do you consistently, as a small retailer, meet those expectations then?
I think part of it is understanding what your customers want and what's
Yeah.
important to them,
Yeah.
and spending the time on those things.
For sure.
You're not going to do everything right, but focus on the things that really matter to your customers. Is the first thing.
Definitely.
And then it's I don't think most customers demand perfection. Like, I think most customers are reasonable enough to know that sometimes mistakes happen. It's not the mistake, it's how you handle the mistake that's more important, and that can be managed through systems. Right? Are you? And again, we're talking about, when we talk about a small retailer, are you training your staff? Assuming you have staff, you're not just you. Because if it's just you, you can make the decision, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna. Are you training your staff? Are you empowering your staff to be able to make things right? Even though there's no standard operating procedure that's going to dictate exactly how you should respond in a situation, right?
Yeah.
If a customer comes in upset, and you're able to calm them down and figure out what went wrong and offer a sincere apology, and then figure out what's needed to make it right, the customer is less likely to focus on the mistake and more likely to focus on how you manage to fix it.
Yeah.
And it's somewhat ironically, but making a mistake in your business is actually an opportunity to shine, right?
Correct.
Because it's how you handle the mistake. You can actually build loyalty. And there's been lots of kind of research
Yeah.
on that
Yeah.
if you can actually build loyalty if you make a mistake and recover appropriately,
Right.
right?
Right.
I don't know if I answered your question there.
No, absolutely. I think definitely, I think that's something that smaller retailers should look at and probably give more thought to, because definitely for a smaller retailer, I think the aspect of customers' lifetime value is extremely important and definitely brings in the bucks in the long run. So definitely something that they can look at. So the next thing I did want to sort of talk about, given that most of our audience is young marketers or people interested in the field, right? From your experience, how can someone who's trying to get into this industry look at personal and professional growth, given that there are so many things that are evolving now and are pretty fast-paced with regards to being able to catch up with how consumer behavior is changing, how tech is evolving. What would you suggest a couple of strategies that people can look at for personal growth in this space?
So for personal growth, I mean, the good news is it's never been easier to learn something, right? Like, if you're interested in AI,
Yeah.
there are AI tools you can use for free and immerse yourself in for free and go and play with for free or for very little money. There are free courses available that will teach you everything you want to know about AI. So, and take AI and replace it with anything, right?
Yeah.
You want to learn about storytelling and you want to learn about, research, and it's all out there.
Yeah.
So it's never, I think, been easier to learn if you're motivated to do that.
Right.
I think what anyone who really wants to be great at marketing needs to do is, I think great marketers are insatiably curious.
Yeah.
Right? They like learning new things. They're interested in the world. They pay attention to the world.
Right.
And just they're putting themselves out there in a situation where they can see what's going on, right?
Got it.
Whether
Yeah.
that's in person and online.
Yeah.
So if you want to learn, I think put yourself in situations that you wouldn't necessarily be in or even be comfortable in. I'll give you a small example. I have social media profiles on both Threads and X. I don't like either of them, right? I don't contribute too much. I sometimes use it to complain to companies or comment on movies I liked and stuff, but I don't really use either platform. But Threads and X have become polar opposites of the political spectrum. And so I force myself to go on both of those to understand the world, to understand the extremes of the world, so that I can kind of understand not just what I feel about different things, but also about, what are other people thinking that I may not agree with.
Correct.
But I need to understand their thinking
100%.
in order to be able to form my own opinion or respond to it. Right?
Absolutely.
So I'm making myself uncomfortable intentionally to understand the world better. And I do that with media sources, and I subscribe to a whole bunch of different newspapers and a whole bunch of different newsletters just to do that. Because by getting all of those different perspectives and reading all about them, I'm able to just have an informed opinion in my topics.
Yeah.
I do it on marketing. I do it on retail. I don't do it on every topic. You can't know everything, so pick the things you want to be good at and go in that direction.
No, for sure. I think today resources are very accessible. Like you said, it's a lot about also just taking that first step and showing the intent to be able to use them or learn from them. So that's definitely something that's super helpful. So before we end, one last question that I had for you is, so is there one marketing belief or principle that you hold dear to yourself that you think will remain, consistent even in the future despite evolving consumer behavior, emerging tech? Is there something that you think will remain the same?
That's a good question. I think technology is going to change.
Yeah.
Marketing model is going to change. The way we shop is going to change. I think what won't change, and the proof of that is that it has not changed, is that people love stories. And I think that whether it's your own personal brand narrative, your own personal story, or whether it's your brand story, storytelling is incredibly powerful. And I cannot imagine a world where stories are going to become less effective, less powerful. I think, computers are going to get better at generating art and generating text and, doing a whole bunch of jobs that we may or may not want to do. But I think that the people who have the ability to develop and bring to life great stories are always going to have a place in our world.
Yeah.
At least I hope that's the case. But that is a belief, the power of stories, both in personal lives and in business. I don't think that's going away.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. But apart from this, I think thank you so much for joining us today, helping us understand more about omnichannel strategies, the retail landscape, and also unpacking experiential marketing for us. I think what the main takeaway for me today, and I'm sure for the other listeners, is that marketing isn't really just about selling products, but it's also about creating memorable experiences, storytelling, and bringing in a little bit of magic for your brand.
Which ultimately sells product.
For sure. Absolutely. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. And until next time, keep thinking beyond brands. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew.
Thank you so much.